Well, welcome everybody. My name is Donna Sweden, and I'm a career coach and adjunct faculty member of the STAR Career Development Center. I have a master's in counseling and have been through the graduate school process and realize that it is quite a big endeavor. But if you know what it is that you want and give yourself a lot of time and, focus on where you want to go, then it is not as overwhelming as it may seem. So you're obviously here because graduate school is on your mind and, considering just, I guess, the unpredictability of the future right now, going to school continuing with your schooling might be an idea that will keep you busy. We're going to look at what is graduate school, how does graduate school differ from undergrad, is graduate school the right path for you, what to consider when applying to graduate school, the general admission process, and there are a number of resources at the end of this PowerPoint, and depending on our timing, I may or may not be able to get through all of them, but you will receive them. Let's look at ideally what we want to be able to gain from this workshop. Identifying, three different graduate degrees that one can obtain beyond graduate school. There are many others, but, or rather there's three types of degrees. You will be able to identify three ways in which graduate school differs from undergrad, and obviously and why it would be of benefit to go, and to examine the things, what you need to examine before choosing a graduate school program. So diving in, what is graduate school, or grad school as we like to call it, and I'll probably be saying that from now on. It is an advanced, provides advanced academic degrees beyond a bachelor's degree and can be in any one of these arenas. So there's a master's, which is what I have. You may be able to access a master's, PhD, or combined program. Various fields have those. There's a doctorate. So for example, a doctorate of education would be an ED. Then Juris Doctor is a doctorate of law. The MD is a doctor of medicine. PhD, PharmD for pharmacists. PsyD is one form of getting a doctorate in psychology along with a PhD, and then Doctor of Theology is another version. So as you can see, there are many different types depending on your path. What does graduate school look like? So it's a concentrated course of study, higher expectations regarding the quality and quantity of your work. It's more rigorous evaluation of work by your professors and your peers, smaller classes, with more student interaction, and more research driven. Some programs may require original research in areas of study. Now, no doubt this will really depend on what you do. You may do an MBA program that is a huge class that may even resemble some of your undergraduate classes. Depends where, some of you, I'm assuming you're all Baruch College students, so your classes now may be big, but you also may be in some small classes, so it's really quite individual. This is really the biggest question that you all have to answer for yourselves. And here are some questions to consider. Will a graduate degree benefit you? So in terms of your professional life, no doubt, and your personal life, there are so many things to consider. I've taught this workshop many times over the years, and I've always had, people think about, okay, the timing in your life. Do you have 1 or 2 years to commit to focus, or will you do it part-time because you're going to work, while you're going to graduate school? I did my graduate program was in the evening, school at night and work during the day. No doubt it's also a lot of work, so you need to be able to juggle that. Where will you live? Will you consider virtual graduate school? Now you can see, if you're getting used to distance learning, that many people do their masters online. Is that the right course of action for you? You know, do you want to live in, is the right graduate school for you going to be in another state, in another city? You know, maybe you'll choose a place that is going to give you scholarships. So there's so many different, you know, elements here. The most important thing is choosing the right program. So it's got to be a good fit. And that is can be very nuanced when you're considering all of the you know, different questions about what is it that you want to focus on, what is it about your professional path that you really want to hone in on. You know, when I applied to graduate school, I actually applied to cities across the US, because you can tell I am not originally from America. So I applied, I'm from South Africa, and but at the time, both of my brothers were living and working in New York City, and so that is where I landed up, and here I am. Anyhow, so you know, if you want will a graduate degree benefit you professionally, especially professionally, as opposed to just personally for, I guess, you know, your own intellectual satisfaction. While it's certainly worth it, it can be very costly. So you've got to think of, you know, the ROI is the return on investment. How will it, you know, what are the skills? What is it going to bring you? Is it going to bring you a network, right? By being in a whatever program, you're going to have access to a whole other layer of classmates and people in the working world, or professors, specific research or avenues of, you know, exploration that you may not have access to without going to graduate school. And, you know, is the timing right? Funds, you know, making sure you have the funds in place, having the time in your life to dedicate to a graduate program, because that is so, it really is all consuming. And if you're not going to have that time to focus on it, then, you know, it gets really difficult. So once again, you know, reasons to go to graduate school: you're passionate about a specific subject or field of study. It's required to become a doctor or a lawyer, an attorney. You need to do that, or go to social work school. There are so many avenues. So, but if it's, you know, you need to consider if it's not required but strongly recommended. It's a continued form of career advancement, increased earnings potential. Reasons not to go: if you're not sure what to do with your life, and you just don't, you know, think, well, maybe this might be you know, good to explore. That you hope to discover your career path or figure things out while you're doing it. Not only is that a very costly way to figure out your career path, but what happens if you know, if you're not that committed to it, you're not going to do well, and you're just going to sabotage yourself. If you're unemployed and can't secure employment, not a great reason to go, unless you know that the ROI will be of value and you will be able to enhance your work opportunities after that, or even during. Definitely not to satisfy your parents or anybody else. Gosh, I've worked with so many people who've gone to law school or to business school because that was what was expected of them, or even become doctors for that matter. All of that time and money and, you know, personal energy to put into a degree to satisfy somebody else's needs. The prestige of an advanced degree, once again, is also a huge commitment for that, because it may not at the end of the day bring you what you want if you can't deliver. Lastly, delaying student loan payments. That's a very, very expensive in, you know, consideration if you're going to do that, because you're only going to have double the amount of student loans. Reasons to delay going to graduate school: financial concerns. You need time to save. Unfortunately, at least in the US, we know that graduate school can be expensive, not everywhere, but certainly, in a lot of places. If you need to take time to do the GRE or the MCAT or whatever it is that you need to access graduate school programs with. So give yourself time to study so you can get into a good program, or, even get, because of a great GRE, or you might be able to get extra graduate assistantships and scholarships. A job opportunity. If work comes your way and you have to consider, delaying graduate school, work can be such a valuable learning opportunity too. And graduate school will always be there. A job opportunity may not. So you may really want to strongly consider, that direction. It's your professional interests require professional work experience. So critical. I can't underscore that enough. I have, counseled people who have come to graduate school, particularly during the recession of 2008, 2009. They came to graduate school instead, and then didn't have enough work experience under their belt to be able to market themselves after they had a graduate degree. So then they were overqualified, had too much education and not enough work experience. That's really does not put you, in a strong position to go out and get work. If you may have, some disruptions in your personal life, really definitely a reason to delay. And then lastly, more time to research the field or area of interest. So definitely, if you are not 150% certain that a graduate program or graduate school is the right thing for you now, delay it. It's a huge investment in so many ways that is not worth. So what things do you need to consider when you're choosing a graduate school program? So once you've decided that this is your route and you've chosen a discipline, the next step is to decide where you want to study. So you want to consider the school's reputation, the program's reputation, the program's accreditation. So what do you want to consider? So when you're looking at a graduate school program, look at how many people actually graduate from their program. What's the employment data? Where are their alumni working? That may be, where are they in the country, the companies that they work for. A really great way to research that. And not only would you ask the graduate schools themselves for that data, but you can look on LinkedIn. You can study LinkedIn and see where people from various schools, various programs are working around the country. So that's something, that you can play with. And then you can even reach out to them yourselves and ask them what they thought of the program. Here are all the, logistics are definitely a consideration. Urban or rural, housing, where will you live? Most graduate schools don't offer graduate housing, but, that certainly depends on the school. Access to public transportation. Culture and diversity of the program, how much it costs, no doubt a really critical factor. Application fees, look into waivers. Financial assistance, no doubt a very important consideration too. So there are so many levels at the graduate level, including these words. I don't know if you hear about these terms in undergrad, but assistantships, loans obviously, but fellowships, not necessarily all government based. Practical experience, are internships required? So it really depends on the field that you are going into. Most programs, you're required to do an internship. Getting first-hand experience while you are studying the academic side of things is so invaluable. Getting that experience while you are studying, I think, only enriches your experience along the way. The length of the program, that's certainly something to consider. Every program is different, well, depending on the accreditation. Thesis versus exams. Once again, you know, a PhD requires a thesis that you need to defend. Master's programs generally do exams or papers, you know, to various essays. School class sizes, it may depend where you are in the country, and as well as, you know, the types of programs. And these are really, really important, especially, you know, you may have a certain very niche interest, and you want to find the professors that specialize in that particular interest. So you're going to look at the faculty expertise. You want to make sure that the graduate programs, you know, you want to go to where the professors are that specialize in your area of interest. You want to make sure that there are going to be programs. My interest was always in the career development and career management field, and so, you know, when I went to graduate school, there were professors that did have that area of interest, and so that was important. Other things to consider, and, you know, all of these elements here all contribute to, you know, I guess, reputation of their program. So, for example, you know, how well published are the, you know, the various faculty, what were in frequency of publications, experience outside of the academic community. Are they well known and respected by peers in the subject they are currently teaching? You know, how accessible to students are these professors? These are the kinds of questions you may ask the current students that you talk to, or alumni that, you know, have recently graduated. What type of mentoring opportunities are there? You may want to inquire, you know, what the Career Center offers the graduate students, because that's a very, very big deal. You are putting, you know, all this money, there's such a huge investment into graduate school, and yet are the, you know, is the Career Center going to be there for you afterwards to provide you with the kind of career services and, you know, that and support that you need to land a great job? Is there going to be, you know, recruiters, and do you have access to, you know, lots of different companies via the graduate school alumni, and the graduate school career services, if that is, you know, separate to the other career services? Is kind of starting with the application process, which may seem daunting, and you know, it can be, but I think if you just look at it, you know, step by step, and it's not as daunting. I remember applying to 6 or 7 graduate schools because I was coming from South Africa and I was not sure what I was getting into. But as you can see here, different graduate schools ask for different, you know, requirements. They have different requirements as they relate to the admissions process. However, several components are, you know, quite standard in this in the admissions process. So your GPA and academic profile are important. Standardized test scores, so maybe you're an MCAT or a GRE for the most part, or sorry, GMAT, I was going to say MCAT for medical school, GMAT for MBA. Recommendations, really standard, and the application process. Some graduate schools don't all require a GRE, I should mention, but for the most part, from what I understand, if you're going for, you know, an MBA, GMAT is pretty much standard. All right, so looking at what's you know, important part here is your personal statement, and that's really, you know, having knowing your why, right? Everyone today, that's a big term, a popular term that's used. What's your why? Why do you want to go to graduate school? What have you learned in your undergrad? What have you learned in your life? What life experiences have you had that compel you to embark on this big endeavor, which it is? The other important, you know, pieces here are your previous experience. So maybe it's research that you need to do, relevant professional experience. Well, so resume, if it's just, you know, your work experience. A CV, if you've done more research and you are going on more of an academic path. Some of you may be interested in being professors. And so the CV, the term CV is usually used in academic circles. Maybe you have started to publish already. Maybe, you know, you've worked with professors in your undergrad or even postgrad, and you've written up publications, you've been part of research. That will kind of turn into more of a CV as opposed to a traditional resume. CV really just means that you include everything. There's no limit to how long a CV is, because academia want to see everything that you've accomplished. Whereas a resume is thinking more along the lines of, you know, what you positioning yourself for a job, and it really only, for the most part, it contains your education and your work experience and your skills, for that matter. Then lastly, you know, the fit. What kind of student are you? Let's see, the profiles succeed at, so the student profiles that succeeds at a particular institution. So, you know, every institution has their ideal type of student that they're looking for, that they recognize will flourish and succeed at their organizing, you know, their institution. So that's something that you can research, you can find out, you know, what's the profile of all the current students or alumni that you've spoken to. What are the patterns that you recognize in the experience or the makeup of each person you've spoken with? So those are some things that, you know, you want to consider. Are you the right match? Because if you're looking to apply to more competitive programs, then you have to, you know, be the right fit for that institution. So important to consider here is, you know, your academic profile. Obviously, education is about grades, so we can't take that out of the picture here. So, you know, as I mentioned, there's no GPA so good that if taken by itself will assure your admittance to any given program. Just like undergrad, to many degrees, they, you know, take into consideration so many different elements that you bring to the table. So it's not just about your GPA. While they obviously want to see strong, you know, academically oriented students, that's not the only thing. So, you know, you can see here, they've obviously 3.0 is a great place to start, but, you know, you may need much higher grade if you are applying to get assistantships, fellowships, or even, you know, just getting into a very competitive graduate program. Other elements that can certainly help you, you know, diversify your profile are, and, you know, maybe you've had the chance to do some of these, maybe you haven't, but studying abroad, doing an independent study, getting involved, you know, all the things you heard before entering into college, how you needed to expand your resume. Same goes for graduate school. Obviously, the more that you have done and accomplished in your, you know, in your years, just the more engaged you look and committed you are to whatever it is that you, you know, enjoy doing and where you've made a difference. That's what that counts. So, you know, if you're involved in sports, if you're teaching, you know, you're coaching Little League, it doesn't matter if you're passionate about it and you can talk about it and how it's meaningful for you, or if you just showcase that on your resume, that all counts. Community service, you know, being involved at school, employment, you know, all of these count, and it doesn't matter. It can be any combination of the above. And really, at the end of the day, it depends on how you make it all fit and what you put into it. So those are the pieces of the puzzle that you have to consider. moving on, the fun part, standardized exams. You're required to write, depends on the graduate degree you wish to pursue. So you've got the GMAT, the LSAT for law, MCAT for medicine, and GRE for psychology and the other liberal arts programs. Some require the GRE, some don't. So that's part of your research. Letters of recommendation are pretty standard. Most graduate schools ask for at least 3 letters of recommendation. And you want to be, think about carefully about who you're going to ask, and people that you can consider are professors and employers. Ideally, you have a combination of these to ask. I did when I was applying to graduate school, but I had been out of college a couple of years, and so I went back and I reminded I had to contact them and let them know, they had to remember who I was. It had been, a handful of years. Ideally, during your college years, you have made some connections with professors. And if you're still in, undergrad now, that's really so important is, being memorable. That's a term we use in the career management world, is, engaging enough with a professor or an employer or a manager so that they remember you, they see the strengths that you bring to the table, and that they can speak to them. And, if they, so that, as it mentions here, it's so important that they know you and they know your work well, so that they can speak to your professional interests and goals, and they like and respect you. Now, that may not be the case. It may be the case. Some of the things that you can do is you can remind them with an essay that you wrote, or you can say, these are, even just share with them, what have you been doing in the time since you were last in their class? If you're in school now, it's so important that you cultivate that relationship, and even, possibly talk with your professors and say, I'm considering going to graduate school. What do you think? What do you recommend? But building those relationships, so when the time comes for you to, to apply and get these recommendations, you have this information. One of the things that you can do is, and I remember hearing a professor suggest this, is that at the end of a class, you have a professor write up, and I'd probably, Google it, see, find out what the Google says about getting recommendations from professors while you're still in their classes, because professors have such busy lives. They have hundreds of students and they might forget you, but ideally not. But you really want to make sure that you maintain that connection. So do what you can to nurture that relationship. So I can't underscore that enough, because those letters of recommendation can be really valuable. Moving on, more about the letters of recommendation. Make sure that, the people that are providing you with those recommendations have academic or professional credentials. If your work, they may not have academic credentials, but at least you're going to have a couple, maybe two professors recommending you, and then one manager, one supervisor, because they can speak to your character, and that is, or even the quality of the work that you provide, your writing skills, your communication skills. There are so many pieces to this puzzle. The last point here is know people in the program or university you are pursuing, but ideal, but not required, because you may not. Some of you may want to continue, going to graduate school at Baruch, and maybe people there who can provide that letter of recommendation, but maybe not. So you have to think broadly and creatively sometimes. All right, so the big part of this process, and probably within every single graduate school application is the personal statement. And this is really important. The strength of your personal statement is measured differently across graduate programs, but here are a few things to keep in mind when crafting it. Most important, tailor your statement to the program you are applying to. Be sure to highlight particular reasons on why the school and program appeal to you. So, you know, this requires you to, this really does require you to be very mindful that each application is very individual. It's not like if you've done this where you send out a resume to, you know, 5 or 10 or 15 different jobs. You cannot do it. You have to customize every application, because you have to consider who are the faculty, what is the curricula that pertains to that university, that graduate program, what is, you know, what do you, ultimately, what do you want to get out of it, right? So you want to be very tailored. You want to tailor each application so that every graduate school feels like you only want them, because then if they feel that way, they might be inclined to say, well, if they want only me, you know, then she, you know, gosh, all the interests are so in alignment with what we do and you know, our mission. And so, you know, that's something to, yeah, to consider. Very important, stating your short and longer term goals. So, you know, this requires a lot of thought. And I, you know, certainly recommend that you come to the Career Center and you chat with the career counselor and process all of this and, you know, figure that out. That's fundamentally the, you know, the work that I love to do. So if any of you are at that stage, make an appointment with myself or, you know, any of the other career counselors, because that is really, really, really important. And, you know, you may, as you go take a step back and do that work, you might find that maybe graduate school is not the right thing for you to do right now, and you buy yourself some time. But lastly, highlighting what you bring to the table, your contributions to the program, you know, what strengths do you bring? So, you know, when I was applying to go to graduate school, I had already, I was in my late 20s, and I had already been working in various roles, and I had quite a bit of experience. I'd worked in South Africa for at least 10 years, because since I mean, from the beginning of graduate school, of college, I was working in all and volunteering in all different types of roles. So I could draw on all of those experiences. So I, you know, was able to speak to all of that. Before we continue, I'm going to quickly answer a question from someone. Can I ask my manager to write recommendations letters for me? So I'm not quite sure what you mean, except for professors. Let's see. So maybe just ask a manager. Well, you definitely want to ask, you know, managers. It definitely, you will, I do encourage you to most graduate school programs want at least one, you know, recommendation, if you know, at least one from an academic perspective, because you are continuing your academic you know, process, and it's an academic process, so only professors will be able to speak to that. So it's really, really important that you ask professors. I hope that answers your question.
I also have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes. I wanted to know, I know you spoke about social work. Can with social work being in going for a master's in social work, can that help with a pre-ed degree in the future, or with being a doctor?
Social work, thank you for your question. So I mean, social work is it's like a foundation. I mean, it depends. you know, in the social work program, I looked into social work programs. Every social work program, they have different paths you can go on within the School of Social Work. So it really depends on what skills you want to develop. You know, I mean, it sounds like you're interested in education as well, or medical school too, Julie. Sorry, I'm not following your question. You're looking for social work, 2 years of social work, over and above, and then going on to another graduate program? I didn't quite follow.
Oh, yeah, because I was just thinking of like applying for social work and a master's in social work, but I'm not sure if like where that can take me. Can I also dive into, or can that also lead me into like a doctoral? I mean, not a doctoral degree, but well,
you can do a doctorate in anything, right? A doctorate is just you would get a doctorate. I mean, it's a it's the highest level of study, and it's a greater, you know, in-depth skill set that allows you to teach. It allows you to, you know, you just have a greater, more comprehensive skill set. Depends what you want to do with it. Social work, you know, if you wanted to go into education, you can be a school social worker. So you would just need to have experience working in a school setting, for example. Does that answer your question? So, I mean, social work is a finite degree that you can go out and work, or most master's degrees are finite degrees, unless you want to become a professor, in which case you may need a PhD, or you may need a PhD for some. So say, for example, economics, right? And you want to, you know, work in a graduate program, or you want to be a professor, you will need a graduate degree. But social work is a master's degree. That's a finite degree. You can go out and get a professional job with that. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yeah, because I just wanted to know, because I was gonna go into social work, but I'm not sure if I can still have a career in medicine or be a doctor or something like that.
Well, so yeah, I know somebody. I mean, she works at, say, Sinai Hospital, right? In all hospitals have social workers, and there are many different roles, or, you know, because psychology, I mean, social work is essentially, the foundation is psychology, and then patients with that, right? So you can work in a hospital setting, or you can work in a school setting, or you can work in a private practice. There's many different settings that you can work. All right. Yeah, great. If you have further questions, just put them in the chat, and or maybe wait till the end. I'll be happy to answer them. All right. Thank you. Okay, I'm just going to mute you. Not sure, or if you can just mute yourself, that would be really helpful.
Okay.
All right, thank you. And it's just quickly here, because I know this is so much information to take in, but one last question from Maria. Is it okay to ask for recommendations from someone in a student-run organization and who's close to our age group, but had a director role in the national team and was a supervisor? Well, you know, it really depends. That's a tricky one, Maria, because, you know, if they are still in undergrad, it doesn't matter, you know, even if they were a director role, if they're still, you know, it just depends how much experience they have under their belt. I'm not sure, you know, what that